Welcome, CUP supporters. I'm just so delighted to have with us today Ryan McCann. He is the executive director of the Indiana Family Institute, a nonprofit public policy development and advocacy organization focused on strengthening Hoosier families. Ryan is a deep Christian. He's a follower of Jesus Christ, passionate about cultural renewal and God-honoring public policy here in Indiana and nationally. You know that IFI is among 41 family policy councils across the nation. It's affiliated with the Family Policy Alliance in Colorado, the Family Research Council in Washington, D.C., which is a think tank, and the Alliance Defending Freedom, a legal alliance defending the right to hear and speak the truth. Don't we need that, folks? We need to speak the truth. So IFI's key priorities, if you go to their website, and I encourage you to do this, go to the Indiana Family Institute website and go under their issues, and you're going to see that they align with Corpus Christi for Unity and Peace, which are the sanctity of life, the sanctity of marriage, and religious liberty. Let me tell you a little bit about my guest here, Ryan McCann. Mr. McCann double majored in political science and pre-law and history in his undergrad, and then for his master's degree in government with a focus on public policy. He has stood for faith, family, and freedom, and he has been in so many media publications, from TV to print to radio, such as CNN, USA Today, NPR, Chicago Tribune, the list goes on, Washington Post, Breitbart News, our nice conservative outlet, One News Now, and various other state and local media organizations. Among his, huge list of accomplishments, you really need to search this out. He's the author of the Indiana Family Report. That is a detailed statistical analysis on the state of the family here in Indiana. We need to educate ourselves on this and ignite critical thinking. He was appointed by Governor Mitch Daniels in 2006 to serve on the Governor's Commission for a Drug-Free Indiana. Now, Ryan, I've met with Ryan. I had lunch with Ryan. He stands for family, for faith, and for freedom. He just had his 5th child. I want to congratulate him and bless his wife and his family. You know, it's just, he's creating a legacy. And, you know, he has stood for freedom here in the Indiana State House. He's concerned about all of us citizens at the local level on marriage, family, and religious liberty, because they are in jeopardy. We are seeing this, we are witnessing this, and it's happening in real time every day. We're seeing it unfold. The thing that I find most amazing about Ryan is he has led coalitions to protect marriage, a union between a man and a woman within Indiana's Constitution. He has assisted in numerous pieces of legislation to protect women and children from the abortion industry. We need people like Ryan here. He's led the successful lobbying efforts to protect our religious liberties of Hoosier students, our youth, and perhaps most notably, led the diverse coalition which successfully advocated for Indiana to join 30 other states. Now, I need you to hear this, 30 other states in what we all know as the Hobby Lobby bill, but which was the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. He has also testified against numerous attacks against free speech and religious freedom, as you're going to learn today. He's very knowledgeable at I think not just the local level here in Indiana, but he understands the issues broadly. Of course, Ryan serves as the executive director of IFI, but also of the Indiana Family Action and Indiana Family Action PAC. What they're able to do is IFA is the advocacy arm of the Indiana Family Institute, and the IFA PAC is the Political Action Committee that's dedicated to electing pro-family public servants in Indiana. And this is what we should all learn and be aware of. Look at their website, look at that legislative agenda, and become familiar with it. Ryan and his wife, Tori, have been blessed, as we know, with these 5 wonderful children. So I want to welcome Ryan. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you, Vicki. Wow, that was quite an introduction. I don't know if I deserved that, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you and CUP. I love the work that you all are doing and so glad to partner with you.
Well, thank you very much. So what I'm going to focus on first is all about our freedoms, you know, religious freedoms, freedoms of speech, and just our constitutional rights. And first, I want to congratulate you. You had a huge win this week, a huge policy win for the IFI and all of its allies. You reported, after hundreds of emails went to legislators, as well as testimonies from several Hoosier pastors, that the Indiana Senate passed on February 1st, Senate Bill 263. So could you share a little bit more about this and why it's important to Indiana?
Sure, absolutely. So Senator Eric Cook is the author of this bill. He's down in Southern Indiana and just a great conservative Christian guy who cares about faith, family, and freedom issues, also an attorney. And he saw, and we saw here at IFI, what I think we all saw around the country when it came to some of the COVID-19 activity, where you saw some states where the liquor store was open and the casino was open, but the church was not allowed to be open. Even if you had a massive church where face masks were being observed and you were able to stay 6 feet apart and all the things that were asked of them. And in Indiana, we were better than most, I think, but there were still some issues locally in some areas where local elected officials gave churches a hard time and really made it hard for them to meet together. And so our perspective was that should not be the case. Our Constitution, both in the state of Indiana and the U.S. Constitution, gives religion extra protection because it's a fundamental right. And so our view was that we needed to make sure that we treat religious organizations as essential. The churches that came in, pastors that came in and testified, talked about the food pantries that they ran, of the diapers that they give out to the community, of the helping to care for the children of first responders and healthcare workers during the COVID crisis, and all these things that they're doing in the community to serve the community during COVID. And yet, in some cases, they're treated like second or third class citizens and not allowed to meet, not allowed to do the things they need to do as a church. And they talked about just a lot of ways in which they're helping the community, including helping people with some mental health issues and depression and other things, which we've seen a huge spike in 2020 since the COVID pandemic struck. So basically, this bill would basically just try to, within law, treat religious organizations as essential. So if the liquor store's open and if Walmart's open and you can go in there, you know, and the church wants to be open and wants to observe the proper safety procedures, then the church ought to be able to be open as well.
Yeah, our church has been open since May, and we haven't had any outbreaks, not whatsoever. If you follow the right kind of protocol, that'll happen. We've got to keep our churches open. And so I'm so grateful for everything that you've done. Do you know if there's any similar bills like this that in other state senates across our nation?
I would imagine so. I don't know all the states that are carrying these. I do know our national counterpart, one of our national allies, who you mentioned at the beginning, Alliance Defending Freedom, does just wonderful legal work all over the country. They've taken so many cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, religious liberty cases, right to life cases, all sorts of things. And really, they helped a lot with this legislation, and I know they're helping other states, my other counterparts in other states to do this as well. I just at this time don't know what all states are taking this up, but I know there are others.
Okay, all right. Well, I think when we saw what happened in New York and the Supreme Court that intervened, you know, when both the Jewish and the Catholics came together, you know, to say, look, we have to be treated equally.
Sure.
I think that was a very good sign. So, all right, well, that's encouraging. So we're watching closely Senate Bill 74 and regarding employee religious vaccination exemptions. And this is really important with COVID right now. Could you share with us a little bit about this bill and its likelihood of advancing? The reason I'm doing this, yesterday, LifeSite News, which is a huge, Catholic media publication, sent out an alert to all Indiana Catholic residents to write their senators.
Yes.
And so I did that, and I sent it out in our newsletter, and I'm hoping all of our CUP supporters that are Indiana, residents, that they've done that. So if you could share a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Senate Bill 74, the concept there is that a private employer should not be able to force you to take a vaccine as an employee in order for you to be employed in that business. And so it received a committee, got a lot of positive testimony. IFI testified in favor of the bill in committee in the Senate. It did not receive a vote there, and as of now, it does not look like it will receive a vote. We still have a little time where the committee could hear that and it's already been heard, but all they need to do is vote on it. I think the problem that we're seeing is you have the Indiana Chamber of Commerce and some healthcare organizations that oppose the bill. Their basic argument is, well, there are some businesses that, let's say a hospital or other businesses that deal with healthcare sort of services, and in some cases they feel like they need to force their employees to receive some of these vaccines, and so that they don't possibly pass some of these things on to people at their healthcare facility or whatever. I think any bill that comes before the legislature, if it was easy and if it was solvable somewhere else, it would have been, and so they have to make tough decisions. And in my opinion, and the position of IFI is, we support Senate Bill 74 because we believe that people's autonomy with their body and what kind of vaccines or what kind of medical treatment that they want should really trump basically the business's interest in some of these things. And so at the end of the day, I feel like we have to lean on the side of employees, and the fact that you might basically fire someone or make it so they cannot be gainfully employed anymore because they wouldn't accept some sort of a vaccine, to us just over the line.
It's a religious freedom issue too, because Lozier Institute has done a beautiful analysis of where there has been a aborted fetus cell, stem cell, used either in the development or the testing of some of these vaccines. And frankly, every single one of the COVID vaccines may have made it through development, but then in testing, even in third stage, they're using aborted fetal cell lines to do this. And there are diehard pro-lifers that feel there's no way from a religious standpoint. And so for an employer to force somebody to do that, I just think this could reach to a higher level.
Yeah, I have looked, and I believe it's Charlotte Lozier that put out a chart. They kind of compared a lot of so some are worse than others, but certainly that is present, and that's something exactly that should be taken into account. There's a lot of religious liberty issues that go on there, and even for Hoosiers that maybe wouldn't be people of faith, do you really want your employer to be able to make healthcare decisions for you? That just does not seem to be the American way. But certainly there are conscience issues and religious liberty issues there that really should carry the day, in my opinion. And that's why we support the bill.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. So there is another bill, Senate Bill 75, and it states that any edict from the executive or judicial branches that evades our constitutional rights or lawful authority of the legislative branch is null and void until approved by the General Assembly. I think our Governor Whitmer in Michigan, really, they needed this, right? I mean, yeah. So, we've seen these governors overreach across the nation, during COVID, and some would argue a little bit that our governor might have. What do you think about this bill's chances?
I think it's important. There's a lot of bills that are similar in the legislature this session that would
Okay,
rein in executive authority. And I think some version will pass. There are just a number of them. And I don't know as of yet, it's still early, what the final language would look like. But I would be very confident in saying I think that something of that nature will pass. I think Whitmer and Governor Whitmer in Michigan is a great example. You can go to Walmart and you can, buy a loaf of bread, but you better not buy that tomato plant because that, is undermining the republic somehow. So,
right, right.
lot of craziness. I mean, you have the issues, and back a little bit to Senate Bill 263, but you have Nevada where casinos can be open, but churches cannot. Just kind of even here in Indiana, I feel like Governor Holcomb generally did a pretty decent job the first couple months, and then
Yeah,
you had the executive order that was going to mandate masks, which would have carried a misdemeanor with it, which was a problem. And thankfully, he walked that back. And then you had other local areas of local government in Indiana with just all over the board. You
yeah.
had Governor Mayor Hogsett that was actually, people were outside trying to walk through Eagle Creek Park, and he's towing cars and he's kicking people out. And I thought that's what we were supposed to do: get outside, get some fresh
Right,
air,
right,
distance ourselves. And so
right.
there was a lot of craziness going on, and so I think all these sorts of bills, what they're trying to do is to say the executive, regardless of who it is, whether it's Governor Holcomb or someone else in the future, the executive should not just get carte blanche authority to do whatever they want to do and be king, of Indiana
Absolutely.
for
Yeah,
months and months. The legislature, the legislative body, is where the power of the people needs to reside. They are the entity that needs to be making public policy, and not the governor, even though the governor has a part of that. And something else that's helpful to understand in Indiana, we are one of the weakest executive states in the nation, where our governor actually, by design, has less power than most governors in other states. Just a bare majority overturns a governor's veto here in Indiana. The governor doesn't even really get to decide who his Supreme Court justices are. It's a panel of people that give him three options, and then if he doesn't like those, he gets one more chance, and then he has to select one of those three. So really in Indiana, the executive branch is weaker than a lot of other states. And so I think the legislature wants to continue that history and just kind of restate the fact that the legislature needs to decide these issues.
yeah. Which is that's the right balance. We need the three-legged stool to work effectively. So I'm going to shift to a little bit about censorship right now. You can't pick up or read an email without this being addressed. In view of all this censorship of conservatives and of people of faith and people of morals, right? Does the Indiana Family Institute have plans to move away from Twitter? The reason I ask this, you were the one that turned us on to the fact that Life Center was being censored on Facebook. And I had already been saying to our board that we needed to do something. We decisively moved off of Facebook, and we're now on MeWe. And so I'd like to just get your sense on that. Are you going to move off of Twitter?
Twitter is something that I have never found to be all that valuable. I've always found Twitter to be heavily populated with liberals and not conservatives. It's never been a great useful tool for us. We've been on there. We put information out. We have some followers on Twitter, but it's never been a huge emphasis for us. Facebook has been better. Up until recently, the fastest growing demographic in Facebook was 50 plus individuals. A lot of grandparents and others, trying to keep track of their kids and grandkids and share pictures and all those fun things. And that tends to be a lot of our folks, not exclusively, but so that was really helpful to us in a very cheap way to be able to communicate easily with a lot of our people. How I view a lot of that is maybe a little different than some are seeing it, but I see the big problem is not having, not necessarily moving off of it, though I think that may be something we have to do eventually. But I see the lack of availability for us as a real detriment. And basically, these huge companies are putting all conservative and Christian organizations at a competitive disadvantage, where you have millions and millions and millions of people on Facebook and Twitter and some of these social media accounts, and very few people on other, avenues. And so basically you are hamstringing conservative organizations, Christian organizations, so that they don't have access to those people on those sites. Whereas the liberal groups, all have access. And so really what they are doing is they're putting us at a competitive disadvantage with the technology. And unfortunately, there are some other ones out there, MeWe, Parler, others, but in my view, they're just not really quite ready for prime time. They're not, they don't have the number of people on there. The technology is not quite up to speed yet. A lot of these other social media giants have had years and years and years to, put tons of money into their technology and make it better than everyone. In my opinion, some of them are monopolies. And
they're oligarchs. They're actually oligarchs.
Yeah.
They're hegemons.
And so the problem is, I do think, and I've seen a move from a lot of conservative and Christian organizations to move away from Facebook and Twitter, and not only that, but other social media. I think that's a real possibility. The problem is the things that we move into, do they work, and do they help us at all? I'm hoping that some of these other technologies and other apps and things can catch up, and that we can have some other alternatives. It's hard right now. I mean, even at IFI, we used to do really well on Facebook, had a tremendous amount of traffic over the last couple of years. About a year ago, we really saw our traffic decline heavily. We believe that is purposeful with Facebook, of really throttling our traffic.
Well,
Also,
it's algorithms. Yeah, they're writing algorithms to ensure that your information's being concealed. And so what I'd say to you CUP supporters is go to their website, and I'd say go become a member of MeWe, and we've already, like, overnight, we only have 600 supporters, but you have many more, but we just got started too, right? But we're approaching 100 on MeWe, so that's not bad. But I'd say everybody go set up an account on MeWe, because the only way that we can affect this is if we move off these platforms and get onto the alternative platforms. To me, that's the only way. So,
sure. Well, I would say it would be good to try. I mean, that's what we're going to do, is we're going to try other alternatives.
Yeah.
Not only alternative apps and social media technology, but even maybe, shifting some of our communication to some other mediums as well, trying to do more mail. Nobody does mail anymore, go back to do some of that. It's more expensive, but, there's all sorts of other, alternatives that conservatives and Christian organizations are going to need to look into. And we're needing to do the same thing.
Absolutely. See, and on this topic, maybe you can address, how you're going to address these big tech, tyrants in our state specifically. Governor DeSantis, we just saw in the last few days how he fined, big tech $100,000, and now he's outlining an entire legislative proposal, to provide more structured oversight for these oligarchs. Now it does seem like it's more of a federal issue to me, but since they cover obviously the whole country, but could they be defined as a publisher and then not as a platform, and then be fined by the FCC and maybe even sued by users? I don't really know what the answer is, but is there something at the state level that can be done, Ryan, that we can address?
JD Prescott has an interesting bill this session. It's on our legislative agenda. If people go to our website, who'syourfamily.org, and then now there should be a picture up that rotates on the front screen that says our 2021 legislative agenda, and they could just click on that. And at the bottom of that agenda, there's a bill from JD Prescott that deals with taxing social media companies And it's an interesting concept. I think it's a different side of the same coin of what Governor DeSantis is trying to do. I think the concept is basically that, Facebook and Twitter and some of these giants, they've benefited greatly from Hoosiers' personal data. We've provided data to them. They've benefited from that in the billions of dollars. If you're any other business in Indiana, you would have had to pay taxes on some of those activities. They haven't, and so that's one approach. I know that it's a bit of a there's a debate going on within conservative circles because before Twitter and Facebook and some of these social media centers, we were relying on traditional media. We were relying on cable news and print journalism, and we know where they're at. They are 100% against us. There's a few conservative outlets here and there in some of those, but as we've even seen with Fox News, it's you just don't know what you're getting there. So in a lot of ways, the internet has helped conservatives tremendously to connect with each other, to get the word out, to educate on a lot of these issues. And particularly Facebook, I think, has been very effective for conservatives. And that's why the left has hit them so hard. And so it's a tough one where I think a lot of conservatives don't want to completely destroy social media because that's been such a help for our message instead of having to rely on CNN and some of these groups that are just 100% against us. But now, the big tech companies have shown that they've always been liberal, but now they've shown they just want to destroy us. And so I think it's very prudent to push back. I like what Governor DeSantis is doing. I like J.D. Prescott's bill. It's in our legislative agenda. I like trying to think creatively. I think back to Teddy Roosevelt. I'd like to do some more research on some of the antitrust and monopoly busting back then. If those companies were monopolies, I would like to see how they would compare to a Facebook or a Google or Twitter or some of these things.
I agree. Interesting. I think, at some point, the Parler thing, that was such a striking blow. President Trump and then Parler, those two, the gloves came off, and it no longer was concealed.
Right.
And at that point, we knew, action had to be taken because we've known this for a long time.
Whatever people think about President Trump, the fact that you had these companies that thought, give themselves the power to totally ban a sitting president from communicating with the public, I think is just crazy. And, focus on the family, who's also our national counterpart, has also been taken off of Twitter currently just because they talked about basically a biological man who believes that he's a woman, pointing that out, that he's a biological man. And they got them banned from Twitter as well. So, they've really overreached.
They are. They're trying to redefine everything. So corporations, they're becoming more woke, and it's getting pretty scary. And they're enabling policies that go against, the values, the conservative values that you and I and IFI and CUP hold dear. Here in Indiana, and frankly, you've even mentioned it, the Indiana Chamber of Commerce are siding up with a lot of these policies and that are influenced with, I think, the lure of attracting companies from other states, or for instance, retaining Salesforce or companies like Salesforce. What's your read on this regarding Indiana businesses?
Indiana's really been a leader in this in ways that we didn't really intend to be. Years ago in 2015, when I helped with some legislators with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, we called the Hobby Lobby bill at the time. It had been passed in many, many states all over the nation. It had almost identical language had passed through Congress when Bill Clinton was president and passed overwhelmingly. I think there were only 1 or 2 votes against it in all of Congress, and Bill Clinton signed it into law. We pass it, and all of a sudden this huge storm comes to Indiana. And I really saw at that point the power of some of these corporations where for a week that session, basically these major corporations took over the state of Indiana. They took over our state government. You had, and I love Governor Pence. He was under a lot of pressure at the time. you had the governor and you had, Republican supermajorities in the legislature, and yet you still had these major corporations parading through the state house and basically taking over the legislature to the point where they took a bill, they completely stripped it, removed all the rules that you are supposed to follow during a legislative session. In 1 week, they passed this bill through the House, the Senate, signed by the governor, completely against the rules of how legislation is supposed to operate in order to pass the quote unquote fix that where they added sexual orientation, gender identity into our policies. And so at that point, I saw Lilly and Cummins and the Pacers and the NCAA and a lot of major corporations in Indiana that really have outside influence. And so that opened up my eyes, and I think a lot of people's eyes at that point to the power of some of these corporations have. I did a little research just a couple of days ago to look at the top 100 employers in the state of Indiana. The top of the list is Cummins, who's a very liberal organization. People don't understand Cummins. They make these huge diesel engines for these massive trucks, and you think, oh, they must be, very right wing. They are not. They're extremely left wing. They gave $100,000 to the opponents of the marriage amendment years ago when we were trying to pass a marriage amendment here in Indiana. It was called Freedom Indiana, was the GLBT group that was pretty radical and opposed that. Eli Lilly gave $100,000 to that organization at that time. They are the third largest employer in Indiana. You have Anthem, very liberal. The major employers in Indiana, the vast majority of these huge corporations are very liberal, and they dominate the chamber now, and they dominate a lot of circles where conservatives had more of a say maybe 20 years ago. It's a problem.
It's a real problem, and I worked, I was a senior executive at One America, and it always had such solid faith-filled values, and did not align with that whatsoever. And I was always proud to work at that organization, but that's just appalling to me. Well, this is going to tie in well because you were talking about the RFRA, because Ron Johnson, who heads the Indiana Pastors Alliance, he was a strong leader who really enabled the RFRA, and you had so much to do with that, right? I mean, you were instrumental with that, and you just talked about it, all the financial, the political pressure. Tim Cook, he even came in from Apple, and it caused Mike Pence to back down, our former vice president. I was so disappointed because I really do like Mike Pence, because I think he has such solid family values, but all this pressure came down on them. And so, what they did with this RFRA is they issued this fix, so to speak. So what we saw in Carmel, and all about this, but just for our CUP supporters out there, because maybe this is happening to a local town near you, we saw, because of this RFRA fix, these non-discrimination ordinances in direct violation with our constitutional rights that were being passed. And what they did is these ordinances allowed us, presumably because of this RFRA fix. And so now we've got Carmel, who maybe you can explain a little bit about that, just give them a little context, what that means with this fix. And apparently Jim Bopp brought suit against these ordinances and it failed. I don't know if there's an appeal, but just talk a little bit about that, because I know it's so near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go back just a little bit before we passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act here in Indiana. The reason we brought it forward, really one big reason, was the Hobby Lobby U.S. Supreme Court case. And if people remember back with the Hobby Lobby case, you had the Obama administration mandating that pro-life organizations had to pay for abortifacients as a part of their health insurance policies. And that obviously a violation of their First Amendment rights, of their religious liberty. And so that case went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And most people would be shocked to realize that Hobby Lobby did not win based on the First Amendment. They won based on the Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The tough thing with RFRA is that it's a complicated legal balancing act that most people other than attorneys don't understand. Most attorneys understand strict scrutiny, but the average public doesn't. So basically what RFRA does is it's a balancing test, and it says, okay, government, there are some cases when you can come in and you can say that some people exercising their religious rights can't do things. Like, for example, there's a famous U.S. Supreme Court case where there's a group of religious individuals who were sacrificing animals in Miami, Florida. They were openly killing animals and blood was running down the streets. And that was part of their religious practice, was to slaughter animals in public. And so, the local health officials said, okay, we got to have some limit here. There's some health problems related. So there's always a limit to all of our constitutional rights, right? But basically what RFRA did on the state level and at the federal level, it just says, look, government, you've got a little higher hurdle to jump, okay? Religion is really, really important, and you need to let people exercise their religious rights unless there's a really major issue. That's basically what RFRA boiled down to. That's why Hobby Lobby won their U.S. Supreme Court case. The federal RFRA does not apply to the states. And so if you're a state and you do not have your own state law, your own state Religious Freedom Restoration Act, then the government has a much lower hurdle to jump over when they're trying to violate your religious liberty. So our RFRA in Indiana, it elevated everyone's religious rights, regardless if you're Muslim, if you're Christian, if you're, whatever your faith is or lack of faith, it elevates that for everyone. Gay, straight, it didn't matter. That's not what the media said, unfortunately, but that's really what RFRA did. What the RFRA fix did, the legislature was scared to death because all these companies were saying, we're going to shut our business down. We're going to take business out of here. Reggie Miller was on at the NCAA tournament saying, Indiana's awful. I'm ashamed. Charles Barkley, all these famous people were, saying awful, terrible things about us. That if you remember, the Final Four was in Indianapolis that week. It was an awful, awful thing. And so basically what the legislature did was they said, okay, all Hoosiers get their religious liberty rights elevated, except those who believe in traditional marriage, because they had some exceptions. And they said, you cannot, quote unquote, discriminate based on sexual orientation and gender identity.
It's terrible.
What does that mean? Nobody wants to be in favor of discrimination, right? No one wants to. But what that basically means is if you're a nonprofit organization like Indiana Family Institute and you're a religious organization and you believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, and I had a gay activist, let's say from Lambda Legal or some radical leftist organization that wanted to apply to be the executive director or have a position at IFI, if I was to say no in that situation, we'd be violating the law. Yep. And so, that's a major problem. And so when they added sexual orientation and gender identity in there, they basically carved out RFRA to say, but it doesn't apply to these situations. So then you fast forward to Carmel. And so there's a lot of pressure from corporations that are in Carmel to pass a local ordinance, because what you need in order for the leftist activists to attack a nonprofit, to attack CUP, to attack a florist or a baker or any of these folks, what they need is a local ordinance that says it's illegal to, quote unquote, discriminate based on sexual orientation and gender identity. No one ever defines what discrimination is. And so what happens is the left will sue you as, let's say CUP, and you want to be at the county fair and you have a volunteer that you think he's Bob and he wants to represent your organization at the county fair at a booth. He shows up as Susie wearing a dress, and you tell Bob, I'm sorry, you cannot do that and represent our organization. You are in violation of the Carmel ordinance, and you could be fined up to $500 a day until you either relent or go out of business. That's all because of the RFRA fix and because of the Carmel local ordinance that added sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes within that. So it's complicated. There's a lot of legal jargon there, but at the end of the day, it's a major attack on our religious liberty. And really, it's a sleeping giant in a lot of communities within Indiana that don't realize they have sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes in their non-discrimination code. And so at any time, there are a lot of organizations that could be in serious jeopardy. Columbus, for example, it's a $50,000 fine for your first violation.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that would put a small business out of business.
Of course. And And it's just a blatant violation of your First Amendment rights as
Right.
well.
Right.
So
So do you think that there's going to be an appeal, of this, because Jim Bob has brought this suit against the ordinances? Do you think
right.
there will be an appeal?
Yeah, so Jim Bob came to us after the RFRA fix, and he's a good friend. And he felt like that we had a real case of a lawsuit against the RFRA fix and against some of these local ordinances. And so back in, boy, it's been several years ago now. I think it was back in 2016 or something like that. We first filed suit, and it went through years and years of litigation, and we basically lost the lawsuit. During that time, there were some interesting things that happened. One thing was the cities that we were involved in the suit were Columbus, Bloomington, Indianapolis, and Carmel. And those cities basically admitted under oath within that lawsuit that IFI was one of the organizations that was suing in this situation. And they admitted that IFI was not violating the ordinance, and they kind of had to define discrimination a little bit more to say, hey, some of the activities that we're involved in, they had to admit, look, that's not discrimination. So that not only helps us, but it helps a lot of other organizations across the state, that if they're ever given a hard time by their local government, they can come back to our lawsuit and may give them some help. Unfortunately, our lawsuit was not really ever, the content was never ruled on. It was more jurisdictional issues. I feel like really the judge that was involved there just didn't really want to deal with the issue. It was too controversial. And so, like happens in a lot of lawsuits at the federal level, where the U.S. Supreme Court kind of sidesteps a lot of issues on jurisdictional issues, that's really what happened to us, where the content of our case really wasn't decided. And what we did was we basically sued the state and we sued these cities, not for money. It was basically a constitutional claim to say, look, our rights are being violated. In Carmel, where IFI at the time resided as an organization, it was our understanding that if we held events or hiring practices or other things, and we did not bow to the leftist wishes of the GLBT community and some of the things that they would want us to do, that we would be violating the Carmel ordinance, and that we could be fined $500 a day until we went out of existence or gave in. And so we did a preemptive lawsuit to say, look, this is unconstitutional. This is a violation of our rights. We don't even know how to operate as an organization under this ordinance, because we don't know if what we're doing is considered discrimination or not. It's not defined. So that's what the lawsuit, how it went. The court basically kind of threw it out on jurisdictional issues, and so we didn't really get a final say. But I do think it brought some light to the issue, and hopefully will be helpful in the future. This is going to be a long fight.
It is a long fight. Yeah. And it inspired other states, right? To follow suit, which was awesome. That was an excellent explanation. So Ryan, I am so delighted that you shared so generously so much time with us today. I just want to thank you, and I'm going to pray for many blessings for you and your family, especially your newborn little one and your wife, Tori, and especially IFI. And folks, CUP, if you, the Indiana folks, go to their website, check out the 2021 legislative tracker there that they're going to be posting, and just look at their website. And, if you feel called to, please make a donation. They need these funds. They're a 501c3, just like we filed for a 501c3. We're not tax exempt yet. I encourage you to donate to them, because they need the funds to sustain all of these good works that they're doing that completely align with the mission of CUP. I always like to part with a prayer. So do you mind if I do that?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vicki. I appreciate it.
So we're Catholics, so we're going to start with the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, I thank you for your many blessings, and I ask you to pour down your grace and your blessings upon Ryan McCann and upon the Indiana Family Institute and all of its efforts. And I ask you to defend our family, our faith, and our freedom in this state and in our country this year and in all the years beyond. We ask all of these things in your good and precious name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. In the name of the
Amen.
Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Vicki. I appreciate it. And you'll be in my prayers, and Cup will be as well. I thank you so much for the good work you're doing. And it's just a pleasure to be able to partner with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.